Okay, graphing polynomials. So what degree is this? How many x's to the what degree? Did you pick 5? Okay, because we have an x times 2 more x's times 2 more x's, so eventually this would be x to the 5th, which means what's happening with my arrows on the shape? My arrows better be going in those directions, right? Arrows go opposite with a 5th. Okay, let's graph our x-intercepts. So positive 1, negative 2, and positive 3. As long as you have that labeled 1, then I know what your tick marks are representing, right? You just need some kind of label. Okay, y-intercept. So on that, you're making x 0. So 0 subtract 1 is negative 1 times 0 plus 2 squared plus or times 0 minus 3 squared. Okay. Make sure you get the positives or negatives correct on that when you're multiplying it out. Nine and a, so I'm going to go negative 1 times a positive 4 times a positive 9 makes negative 36. Okay, on that I'm just going to do that as a label because I'm not going to give you 36 tick marks or anything. Okay, I'm going to go like this. I'm going to give myself an arrow and an arrow because I know that that should be happening, right? Okay, so I'm going to start here. I'm going to be going up to negative 2. Thinking in my head, what am I going to do when I get here? Cross through it or bounce? Bounce. So I'm going to go up to it, bounce. Then I'm going to obviously have to go through my y-intercept. Okay, as I approach 1, I'm going to, in my head, prepare. What am I doing as I go to 1? Cross through it. And then when I get to 3, what should I do at 3? Bounce. Okay, number 2. What is the degree on this situation? It's a what kind of degree? Third degree, a cubic. But what else is pretty important? Negative cubic shape. So I'm thinking something like that in my head right now. Okay, what are the x-intercepts? What's the x-intercept for this one? What do you think? This one could be tricky. X would have to be what here to make this 0? 0. Or negative 3. So I'm going to draw this for myself so that I know my arrows are going to be doing that. And do you understand I'm not going to do the y-intercept because the y-intercept's actually already on there, right? This is the y-intercept as well as the x-intercept. It's both. Okay, we're going to have to bounce at negative 3. Okay, so can you figure out your shape? You got to bounce at negative 3. Okay, so I'm looking for a few things here. I'm looking for were your arrows going in the right directions? Did you have all the proper intercepts? Did you do the bouncing when you were supposed to bounce, or flattening or crossing? Okay, graph a quartic. Do you know what that word means? Oh, it tells you. 4th degree. The roots are at -3, at 2, and a double root at 1. Okay. This one hasn't told me anything about my coefficient, so I'm going to assume it's 1. Otherwise, you might get some info. The leading coefficient is 1. So we're going to assume the leading coefficient equals 1. Okay. If there was a root at -3, what was the factor? X plus 3. There's a root at +2, so x minus 2, and a double root at 1, so x minus 1 squared. Sorry, I guess we said we're going to assume that that equals 1. Okay, what's your y-intercept? Your y-intercept, if you replace x with 0, you get 3, -2, -1 squared. Where should you put your y-intercept? What are we at? -6? Is that good? Okay, so 4th degree, what's our general shape going to look like? A W. So I'm going to put arrows to make sure I know my arrows better go up and up if I know it's a W. And here we go. -3, what do we want to do? Cross through. Y-intercept. Okay, I'm coming to 1. What do you want to do at 1? Bounce. And then back up through. Okay. I guess I didn't have any triple roots, but everybody knows how to flatten a triple root. That's a triple root, right? Okay, find the equation. So, y equals a. What's the first factor I could write here? What's the factor for this? X plus 2 squared, because it was a bounce. This x-intercept has what as a factor? X minus 1, and it's a bounce, so it's a square. Okay, now I need to determine this a value. So if I was to input 0 in here, I need to get a result of -8. I already in my head know that this number should be negative. Do you see that? Because of the W shape is actually flipped. So I need to get a -8. So if x was 0, 2 squared. If x was 0, -1 squared. negative 8 equals a times, what is all that? 4, right? Positive 4 times a positive 1. Therefore, a equals negative 2. So I need a final equation here. Y equals negative 2, and then all your factors. Okay. Next one. Do you already know what shape this is? What degree do you think it would be? X to the 5. What would you know about a coefficient? Should be some kind of negative number, right? I already know those things. Okay. So we're going to start y equals some a number. Okay. I need a factor. So negative 1. The factor would be x plus 1. But I bounced. It crosses at 1, so I need an x minus 1. And it crosses at 2, so I need an x minus 2 with a bounce. Okay. This is my y-intercept. Not maybe the best scale, but I think we're going to go with that being a 2. Okay? A height of 2. Does that look okay? Because this was 5.
Well, also to find it, could you just like plug all of those in like 0, x and 0, or do you need to have your value for a?
But I need, if x is 0, that's okay, but then you aren't knowing a and you're not knowing y. So that's not good to not know two things, right?
So in an equation, we're never going to have to solve for the y-intercept that'll be given?
Well, when you graph this, you found the y-intercept.
Yeah,
right.
I know, but if you're making the equation and you have
right.
a and y, you're never going to have to find...
You're usually having to find the a.
Not the y-intercept.
Okay. So let's say that this y-intercept needs to be 2. And I've replaced x with 0. Okay, what does all of those three things multiply to? One, -1, and +4. -4. So therefore a equals -1/2. So my final equation, and I did know, remember at the start, I'm like, well, that's a negative coefficient because of the shape. Okay, so please don't forget about your coefficients on your test. I put that out of 2 points. And figuring out your y-intercept or your a value is worth 1 point out of that. So, okay, synthetic division. Let's divide. Okay, so I'm going to put a +1. Looking at my polynomial, is there any missing spots? Is there any missing, or are we good? We're good. It goes down. So 5, -4, -2, and 3. Okay, start by bringing the 5 down. add, multiply, add, multiply, add. What if I ask you questions like, is this divisible by x minus 1? What would you say, yes or no? No, why not? There's a remainder of 2. Okay, so write a division statement. So 5x cubed minus 4x squared minus 2x plus 3 divided by x minus 1 equals what? 5 what? 5x squared plus 1x minus 1. And how do you write that remainder of 2? Plus 2 over x minus 1. Okay, next I'm going to put a negative 3 in the front. Okay, do I have any gaps? Yes. There is a gap in the squared spot. So 1, 3, 0, negative 10, negative 29. Okay, go ahead, bring down the 1 and then start your multiply add process. Okay, what if I just told you instead of writing a division statement, what if I just said to write me the quotient? The quotient means that after you divided, what did you get? Did anybody match me? Are we good? Okay. Okay, so what is this 1? 1 what? X cubed. I'm not going to write this. No x squareds, no x's, minus 10. This is a remainder, so I'm going to write it as plus 1 over okay. I threw in some zeros there just to make sure you're following what do each spot, what does it mean, right? This is a cube, squared, x, number, remainder. Okay, without synthetically dividing, how do you get the remainder if you don't want to synthetically divide? What else could I do?
Oh, don't you just like plug her in?
Plug in a what?
Positive 2.
A positive 2. So plugging in a positive 2, right? Because if it's a factor, you're doing an opposite for the actual x-intercept. Oh, wait. No, I didn't get that. I got that in my calculator, but I didn't get that in my head here. Okay. Do you like to check your answers on a test? Because I have a different way I could check my answer. So if I wanted to do some work on the side and check my answer, what else could I do? Synthetically divide. So then I could plug in a 2 or divide with a 2 out front. Synthetically dividing, do I have any gaps? Yes. I need a 0 in the squared spot. Okay, I'm going to bring this down 3. Multiply 6, add 6, multiply 12, add 0, multiply 0, add negative 15. Okay, so I can check my answer, but it said I couldn't synthetically divide, so I had to do the remainder theorem. Okay, so this is called the remainder theorem. When you plug it in, what's the remainder? Okay, so this says determine whether it could be factored or not. So because this hasn't told me how I had to do it, now do you understand you have 2 methods. So you could do remainder theorem, or you could synthetically divide. So this question would be up to your preference, right? Because it said determine whether or not. My understanding would be that they probably would want you to do the remainder theorem because it should be faster. So plugging in a negative 1 would be like that. Just making sure that I'm typing it in properly. Anybody with a 6? Okay. Okay, you better answer the question though. It says whether it could be factored. So yes or no? No, it's not factorable by that. Okay, the next one. So I'm going to plug in a 3. And again, if you really wanted to, you could be checking your answers using synthetic division if you wanted to. So is x minus 3 a factor? The answer would be yes. It is a factor because 3 is an x-intercept. Okay, graph this polynomial. First of all, what do I know about the shape of it? Cubic. Second of all, what is the y-intercept right away? 6 is the y-intercept. So I know this and I know this right away when I'm looking at it in expanded form. Okay, so I was told that this is a factor already. So I'm going to go into my division and I'm going to put a positive 2. I'm going to look at my polynomial for any gaps. Yep.
How do you know when to just add all the x's together and when not to? Because
Okay.
like before we were looking at how many
Okay.
there are.
Ready? Look at this form. Do you see how it's like all expanded out?
Yeah.
Do you see this form?
Because there's brackets.
They're all timesing by each other.
There's brackets and then we do it like that.
Yeah. This means I'm timesing this and timesing this, I'm timesing this. If you really wanted to do this by hand, it would be like a half to a full page of you expanding binomials. But in the end, you would expand it and it would look like this somehow. Yeah. Yeah. So this is in factored form right now. So here, all my x's are getting multiplied with each other yet. Does this make sense? Do you see it?
So in the factored form, you add, and when it's not,
then you just look for what's the highest thing it ever came out to be.
Okay.
Do you understand that if I was to FOIL this whole thing out, the result would be that I would end up having to multiply x 5 times? Does that make sense? Do you see it?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so look at the two forms. This is already expanded out versus the other one was in a factored form. Okay, so 2 is an x-intercept. Did we look? Gaps? We're good, right? 1, -4, 1, and 6. I already know that that should come out to 0, right? Because it told me it should. So pull down the 1, multiply, add. So if it doesn't come out to 0, something happened that shouldn't have. Okay, so if I'm going to write this in factored form, I already knew x minus 2 was one of the factors. And what else? How do you write this? 1 what? X squared minus 2x minus 3. And can you do this by hand? I feel like last year I had a lot of mistakes there because people forgot about the x minus 2. So don't forget about it, right? It's easy to forget about. And then they were graphing this, and then it was a parabola, right? Because if you forget about it, now you only have an x squared. So please don't forget about this. Okay, so x-intercept at 2, at 3, at -1. Those are my x-intercepts. We decided at the start that the y-intercept was 6. We have no bounces, and we knew our shape was like an N. So you're crossing through all of those like an N. Whoops. I did a very bad graph, so don't look too closely at mine. Okay, next, graph. Okay, what do you know about the shape of this thing?
It's a 3.
It's a cubic, N. What do I know? The y-intercept is 10. So those are some quick things I know. Okay, this time it gave me no info. So where do I start if I have nothing to start with? I need to start some tests. Okay, what's the first number you should start with to try? Try x equals 1. Okay, ready? 1 cubed plus 2 times 1 squared minus 13 times 1 plus 10. Does it work or not work? What are we looking for to know it works? Did it equal 0? Right?
It did.
Did it not? This should be 1, this should be 2, and there's 10, so that's 13 positives. Okay. If it doesn't work, then I would go to a -1. And if that didn't work, I'd go to a 2. So those are my testing strategies. I start 1, -1, 2, -2. Usually you'll get somewhere close like that to work. Okay, what do I know? I know x equals 1 is an X-intercept. That's what I know. What else do I know? X minus 1 is a factor. Those are some things you know. Okay, so now that gives me some info, so I can start breaking down this polynomial. So on the outside, I put a 1. I look at my polynomial to see if I have any gaps. It's good. I already know that the result of this should be 0 at the remainder spot. Okay, so this said to graph, but I might also ask this, can you write this in fully factored form? This might be a question on your test, fully factored. Can you write me a fully factored equation? So y equals, what's the first factor? X minus 1, please don't forget it. Then 1x squared plus 3x minus 10. The result, right? This times this is the polynomial. Fully factored, you got to go further though. So x minus 1, and then I can break the quadratic by hand. Okay, so if I say, on a question, if I say, write the fully factored equation, this is all you would do. If I said in the question, state all the x-intercepts, you would have to do this work, except for you would state 1, -5, and 2, right? So depending what I asked. But since we said graph it, we have x-intercepts at 1, at -5, and at 2. And I have a y-intercept at 10. I have no bounces. And my shape is an N. Okay? So you're for sure going to get a question that starts like this, where you're going to have to test something. Like I give you no info, but I might say, the question might say graph. The question might say, write as a fully factored equation, or it might say, state all the x-intercepts. Okay, this is an equation of a dolphin in the water. For how long was the dolphin out of the water during its second jump? So the dolphin's jumping under the water, jumping under the water. Everyone knows this is the height of the water right here? So there the dolphin is out of the water. So for how long of a duration did that happen? 2 seconds, because it's from 2 to 4. All right, determine the equation of a polynomial. So you might lose points on this one for forgetting about communication, so don't do this. I gave you variables. I didn't give you an X and a Y. Okay, so our equation is going to say height equals okay, ready? Here's my X-intercepts. Whoops, what am I doing? Not that one. Okay, how do I write an X-intercept if it's 0? Just a T. How do I write an X-intercept if it's a 1? T minus 1. How do I write an X-intercept a 2? T minus 2. How do I write an X-intercept a 4? T minus 4. Okay, on this one, we can't really determine the exact A value because I don't have any other exact coordinate to go off of. Usually we go off of our Y-intercept, but that's not going to help us. But I would expect one thing from the A. What is the one thing I expect you to understand about A? What is it? Negative. Because it's a W shape and it's heading downward, so I at least need to see that it's a negative. But you do not have enough info to figure out it's negative what? Negative 0.2, I don't know, negative 3. No idea, but I do know it's negative. Okay, determine the best estimate for the max height reached. So this is a graph. So what do you think that this max height right here, what do you think it's at? I didn't give you the best scale. What do you want to say it's at? 3 point something? I don't know, 3.6 feet. The scale, you got to go with the scale here. This is a -2, -4, -6, so this is a 2. 4 would probably be about right there. Sorry, that was not the best scale to look at, but okay. We have a square paper, 8 by 8. We cut those X corners off. And then we make folds and we make it into a box. Okay, so determine the equation. So after we folded, this would be the new length. What would that length be? 8, what? Subtract 2 x's, right? Because I cut the x's off each corner. Okay, what's the new width? It started 8, and then we cut 2 x's off. Same thing. And when you fold your box up, what's the height of your box? X, right? Because if you cut X off and you fold it up, the height is X. Okay, so volume equals length times width times height. On this one, since these are the same, you could have also done that squared, right? It's not a big deal if you didn't. I'd accept both of those answers. But if your lengths and your widths are different, then you can't do that, right? Okay, graph this function. So, what is the x-intercept on this bracket? What value of x creates that bracket to be 0? If x was 4, obviously this bracket is the same, so I already know it's going to do what on a graph? Bounce. And what's this x-intercept? 0. And what is this shape? An n. It's a cubic, because volume is cubed, cubic. And we said we were going to bounce here. Okay. If I was to ask you about the domain of this situation, domain is talking about the amount of x, which is the part that you cut off. What's the lowest I can go? You can't be negative. So like that wouldn't work. What else? Anything above 0 will work. Can I be exactly 0? No. Because if you cut off 0, your paper's flat. What's the largest amount you can cut off? 4, but you can't cut 4 off, because if you cut 4 off and 4 off, you've now officially cut 8 off, which means your side has disappeared. So this is really the only part of this function that would exist. No, but I might ask you a question about domain. So graph the whole polynomial, but then I say, okay, what's the domain that only applies on our situation?
So you can't use 0 because you wouldn't be cutting off anything?
Yeah, if my x was 0, it's me not cutting anything off. Now I have nothing to fold upward.
Right,
So it's flat.
And it can't be 4
Because then if I cut off 4, like now I have a length of 0. Okay, estimate. Let's find the max volume here. It says estimate the value that would produce the max volume. So first of all, let's answer this question. What x number do you want to predict? Which x value would we be thinking about where we'd be the highest? Yeah.
Would you ever ask for a range?
Range? No.
Do we need to put the 1 on our graph to give it a scale?
Yes, but I don't really know a y value scale, so because you do not know that info right now. But okay, what x value do you want to use? It's just an estimate, so what's a good value? 2? Okay, it just says estimate the value, so we would have been done, but I want to ask this further. What is a good max volume estimate? Okay, so how do I estimate the highest volume? I would plug a 2 into my equation. So volume equals 8 minus 2 times the x value I picked. So to estimate the highest volume, we are plugging in, you guys picked a 2. And what did we get? 32? Okay, it's just an estimate. So I usually just pick, again, the x value that's halfway in that zone, right? Okay, temperature. When you look at this and were to ever graph it, what would it be? Shape-wise. An N? What else do you know quickly? The Y-intercept is -12. Okay, we were told that the temperature is 0 when it's 1 hour of time. Determine the polynomials. So I'm going to start with a division. We were told that there's an X-intercept at 1. So we're dividing. Looking at my polynomial, do I have any gaps? Nope. So I'm going to write okay, we have to make a polynomial function. Should I use x and y? Nope, I shouldn't, because what letters did they tell me? T and H. So temperature equals, what's the factor you're not going to forget to write? H minus 1. Because that was the first X-intercept, right? H minus 1. And then this is what? 1h squared minus 7h plus 12. So temperature equals, and then can we break this by hand here? 3 and 4. Okay, I'm going to estimate the max temperature by graphing the situation because I don't really know where I want to be. Okay, so you don't have to graph, but I'm going to get an idea. There's my X-intercepts, and there's my Y-intercept. And I knew it was an N shape. Okay, estimate the max temperature in the first 4 hours. So I'm going to think about it in that spot. So what kind of X value do I want to predict it's at? Halfway between here and here. So an X, I'm going to plug in, well not X, but H, I guess. I'm going to plug in 2 for H. So the temperature equals 2 minus 1, 2 minus 3, 2 minus 4.